Park. We're happy to sponsor this forum. And I'll just take a second to orient you to this room if you haven't been in here before. This is our newly renovated auditorium.
It's beautiful.
We've got LEED Silver for this renovation. And we've got solar panels on the roof that power the room. It's all very green and very high-tech in terms of audio video. We're very proud of it. And it makes a very nice venue for various community events. And this is, I think, one of the more important ones. And we're really happy to have all of you here so early in the morning. And we're happy to have Montgomery County Council Member and Council President Valerie Irvin here to moderate this. And I'd like to introduce her. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So I'm getting used to this dais. It's very fancy. I'm going to take some of this back with me to the county council. But good morning, everyone. I'm not a morning person, so I'm going to get charged up here while we're going. But it's really exciting for me to be here in the city of Tacoma Park, among a lot of people who have been very supportive from the very beginning of the Purple Line. And I want to introduce my staff member here, Rich Romer, who tries to keep me straight and on time. So there's no doubt that the 6.5-mile stretch of the Purple Line that passes through District 5 touches countless policy and quality of life issues. And so, as you all know, 8 of the 10 planned stops in Montgomery County are in this district, from Littonsville to Tacoma Langley Transit Center. And so the proposed alignment also runs through my neighborhood. And so it's been an interesting 4 years on the council. I'm starting my 5th year, and I remember the very first year we were very gangbuster in the neighborhood, and then things began to change. And so where I live right behind Old Blair. I still call it Old Blair High School. And I could actually, from my front door, see what one day will be the stop. And it's been like civil war in my neighborhood. Half my neighbors are adamantly opposed to the alignment, and the other half are very excited. But over time, as people began to realize that there's actually going to be a Purple Line, now my neighbors are beginning to change their minds about whether or not there's a stop on Wayne and Dale. Why build the transit line that goes right past your house if you can't get on it? So it's been an interesting, actually transformative conversation, not only among my neighbors in Silver Spring, but across the whole county and across the alignment. So I'm really excited to be here today among some experts who can engage us all in a very robust conversation. Last week the council passed the housing element, which is pretty much goals for housing for 20, 30 years into the future. But a cornerstone of that conversation was what kind of county we're going to grow into. And so most of the new development is going to take place near transit. So our focus is on transit-oriented development, and then what is the outgrowth of that for our business community along the Purple Line alignment. So I'm looking forward to hearing about how this project can and will better connect all of our communities. And I'm going to begin right now by introducing our first speaker, Marcia Kaiser from Parsons Brinckerhoff / the Maryland Transit Administration. Marcia Kaiser works with transit-oriented development and has been consulting for the Maryland Transit Administration on the Purple Line team. Recently, MTA completed an economic model of the Purple Line, and Marcia Kaiser is also an urban planning and public policy practice leader at PB Placemaking, a division of Parsons Brinckerhoff. She was formerly director of the Office of Planning and Capital Programming with the Maryland Department of Transportation, and in that capacity, she was responsible for the development of the Consolidated Transportation Program, the Maryland Statewide Strategic Transportation Plan, multimodal planning activities, and oversight of the department's $9.8 billion 6-year capital program. So thank you for being here, Marcia.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'm just surprised I don't know where Anna got my resume. I usually cut it off before then. As she said, I was Director of Planning in the Maryland Department of Transportation, so I've been involved with this project for a long time. I can certainly empathize with your position of being in the community that this is going to happen in, because I'm about 500 yards from the ICC, and one of my responsibilities was getting the funding for it. So, and my husband still hates me for it to this day. So yes, we had split neighborhood too on this. I am working with the MTA as it's almost an extension of their staff on communications and getting out and working with organizations to keep the Purple Line on the forefront as we're moving into the next phase of the environmental. And today I'm not going to talk that much about the real economics. I'm going to leave that to some of the experts that are there, but set the stage for them to talk a little further about how this would happen. As many of you know, the Purple Line is a 16-mile east-west rapid transit line that'll go from Bethesda to New Carrollton. It does parallel the Capitol Beltway. I think we should be proud in Maryland to say we're the first to actually move forward with connecting the ends of the metro system. Most of it will operate at street level, which, if you think about it, has less disruption as we go along. And it is a new type of transit for this region, and some of that I'll talk about as we go through this. This is the alignment, 21 stations in all. I didn't realize almost half of them are in your district. It's going to be mostly in dedicated or exclusive lanes. It won't have that much mix of other things going on. The end-to-end travel time is 55 minutes, but we don't expect the average rider to be going end-to-end. It'll be stops between there. The daily ridership is 60,000, and a total of almost 20,000 cars off the road. Pretty substantial ridership projections in our mind. The greatest ridership is between Bethesda and Silver Spring, and that's primarily because that's where the greatest density is, where the greatest activity centers to date are anyway in moving this. And it's not the start or stop of transit for most of the riders. 30% of them will be using Metro for part of their trips, so it's connecting the various transit lines that the Purple Line provides. And today's estimate of the project in 2010 dollars is about $1.6 billion. I wanted to share with you some of the conceptual design features so you can get a little feel of what we're dealing with and how it is different from the Metro, which is what most people in this region are used to. We are looking at an extension of the Capitol Crescent Trail from Bethesda to Silver Spring Transit Center. Right now, the Capitol Crescent Trail goes through a building. This is what the trail would look like. The transit and the trail would look like going through that tunnel. The trail is actually elevated with the transit below it. We've been working with the owner of the building there, Air Rights Property, to actually make sure we're shoring it up and actually opening it up more. It's a very dark tunnel today. This is what it'll look like in the Georgetown branch area where the Capitol Crescent Trail will parallel it. The trail is next to the transitway, but there'll be vertical circulation and landscape buffers. There won't be the fear of having to of intermixing the pedestrians with the trail. It'll be separated well. This is the design concept of what Silver Spring would look like. This is another level above where Metro is today. So the transitway would come in higher, the Purple Line would come in higher than the Metro, and there'll be connections to the Metro system, as well as the transit center and the joint development that's happening now at Silver Spring. This one is probably one of our favorites. We've been working with the developer of the Silver Spring Library that's already broken ground and started construction. They are so interested and excited about the Purple Line that they're working with us in designing the facilities so the Purple Line is integrated in it. As you can see here, we're going right through almost the first and second floor of the library. And those plans continue to move forward, and I think it's a fantastic connection of development and transit moving forward. Once we get to Wayne Avenue, that's when we really get more of the at-grade shared lanes for the transit line, where we're right in the street networks. There'll be a redesign of the facilities. There'll be new left turns for vehicles. There'll be a short tunnel between Wayne and Arliss. We are trying very hard to keep the tunnels down, cost effectiveness in our evaluation of the funding, as well as the disruption of what a tunnel can do. There'll be a median operation in the Piney Branch area, so it'll go in the middle of the roadway rather than on the sidewalk side of the roadway. This is a design concept of how the Purple Line will mesh with the proposed transit center at Tacoma Langley Park. It'll be a median operation on University Boulevard. We're working very hard with State Highway and within MTA and our engineers to make sure there's safe pedestrian access and connections between the transitway and the transit center. But it'll be a nice connection of the two services within Tacoma. In University of Maryland, we're currently working on an at-grade on Campus Drive with open pedestrian plazas. We're working very closely with the university now, actually being part of their master planning activities for the campus to ensure that this is integrated in a way that's safe for the tens of thousands of student pedestrians and also continues to add to the wonderful flavor of the University of Maryland, that we aren't disrupting from that. Piney Branch Parkway will be sharing lanes under CSX and Metro. We'll be integrating into the College Park Metro station, so we've been working with WMATA on connecting there. Getting into River Road will be dedicated lanes on the south side of River Road, and Kenilworth Avenue at the councilman from Prince George's County, Councilman Olson's request, we've been looking at an aerial structure that we think is going to work. When we come in at Kenilworth Avenue, we're crossing Kenilworth and 410, one of the busiest intersections in our area. And the concern was, if we're at grade, are we going to be disrupting traffic? So we've been looking at how can we raise that. And we've started working with the residents and the business leaders in that area to see how we can fit an aerial structure without too much disruption to the community. But I thank the councilman for his suggestion on trying to move us forward in a way that can keep traffic going. And we're as worried as much about the bus traffic as we are the cars, because the buses certainly connect to the Purple Line here. The aerial structure on Kenilworth the station will actually be on Riverdale Park. And then we come back down at 410 and return to Grays in dedicated right-of-way on the south side of 410. Once we get to Veterans Parkway, it will also stay on a dedicated right-of-way on the south side. And we get into Ellen Road and Duke Carrollton Station. We're working with Park and Planning in Prince George's County. We'll be working with the developers that MDOT and MTA have brought on for New Carrollton to ensure that the Purple Line moves smoothly into connecting with the metro station, as well as the new development that's going to be happening there. In terms of a schedule, what we're working on right now is numerous submissions to FTA. As you know, we have the locally preferred alternative that the governor selected in 2009. Since then, we've been working with FTA to do a lot of analysis on their part to give us what's known as permission to move into preliminary engineering. They've spent a lot of time looking at our travel demand modeling and have signed off on that. We're going through risk analysis now, and once they get through that, we're hoping to have their approval to move into the next active stage, which is preliminary engineering. So it's been a little quiet now since the locally preferred alternative has been selected. It's waiting for FTA to give us the approval. With that approval is the funding, and we'll be moving into the preliminary engineering. We anticipate completion of the preliminary engineering and the final environmental impact statement that goes with that by the summer of 2013, and beginning design. Again, each one of these steps takes approval from FTA, but we're hoping to be able to start design in the summer of 2013 and begin construction in, we're hoping, early winter, late fall 2014, may slip into 2015, again, depending on the processes and the approval from FTA, as well as the funding streams that have to go with it. In terms of benefits, anytime you can provide faster, more reliable transit, it's a benefit. The east-west is very lacking. Right now you have bus service that has the same stop-and-go traffic that your car does. By providing the Purple Line, we're going to enhance the ability to move east-west through the county, which has been a problem for some time. Right now, if you want to take Metro, you have to go all the way into town to come back out and meet any parts of east-west in the two counties. We're going to improve access, not only to Metro Green, red, and orange lines, but the MARC commuter rail stations. With that goes Amtrak, the bus, and Ride-On in Prince George's and Montgomery County. The ability to be able to take transit east-west to Amtrak and New Carrollton, I think, is a great enhancement. People then will be able to go up and down the Northeast Corridor and other places from there. And also connection with intercity bus in Silver Spring as well as New Carrollton. Some more of the benefits. We're going to be able to provide increased service to the transit dependent. I mean, there are those of us that aren't transit dependent that love to be able to chuck the car and get on transit, but being able to provide other means for those that don't have the vehicle to get to jobs, to get to services and shopping. And we're going to be providing increased activity and access to activity centers in the two counties, whether it's Bethesda and Silver Spring, the university, Tacoma, Langley, but New Carrollton also. The actions that are going on there, being able to get there by transit instead of always having to deal with the automobile or the bus services that aren't always convenient or very time efficient. In terms of economic development, I'll let the experts, as I said, talk a little bit more about that. The benefits will come out of what happens with the land use plans in those areas. As working on the Purple Line, our role is mobility, but we're working very closely with the planning departments in both counties and seeing how Purple Line intermixes with their land use plans. But we're supporting with that the regional and state policies, COGS working with us, and of course MTA being part of MDOT. We're working closely there. The Purple Line will provide the ability to strengthen and revitalize communities in the corridor, thank you, and increase the potential for transit-oriented development at existing and proposed stations. We are working, as I said, with both counties on land use plans. Current land use planning that's underway right now, Chevy Chase Lake Sector Plan, Long Branch, I think Tacoma Langley, Melissa can tell me, it's going through approval now, right?
No, actually.
No?
Just got to the point.
Okay. And then the Tacoma Langley Sector Plan on the Prince George's County side, as well as the Annapolis Road Sector Plan that's been recently completed. In terms of general economic development, I can tell you that every dollar spent on public transit projects generates about $6 on average in local economic activity. Every $10 million in capital investment in transit returns about $30 million in business sales alone. These are numbers that we've gotten from the American Public Transit Association. Between 3,100 and 5,700 jobs are generally created for every $100 million invested in public transit, and every $100 million transit investment results in $300 million increase in business sales. And this comes from Cambridge Systematics, who's done a lot of work for FTA on this type of analysis. I'm sure that others behind me will have more. Quick case studies, TriMet in Portland spent $6 billion in totals after an initial $2 billion investment in the MAX system in 1986. To date, they've been able to have $57 million investment, $2 billion in investments in the area, 7,200 new housing units, 4.6 million square feet of office and retail space. Of the $465 million that Metrolinx in St. Louis has invested in 2 additional transit lines, $4.3 billion in development out of that investment, 6,000 new residents, and 8,500 new hotel rooms. just examples of what's been able to happen in connection with transit. 9.6-mile link system in Charlotte, a $2 billion investment, resulted in 50 new developments, almost 3,400 new condos and apartments, 7 office complexes, 3 new hotels, and 2 new retail projects. Quick example, in Minnesota, the $715 million investment, and it resulted in $700 million in development, 5,000 new jobs, 1.2 million square feet of office, 12,000 new housing units. In the Hudson-Bergen line in New Jersey, that light rail of $2.2 billion, $5.3 billion in housing, which resulted in 20,000 new housing units, 18 million square feet in office space, with the potential to support 60,000 new jobs with that job. So just a quick report to you of actual benefits that have been realized from transit across the country. The experts, the economic experts behind me, I'm sure will have a lot more. Any questions you might have after this, I've put Mike Madden's address up there. There's also www.purplelinemd.com. We'll be glad to answer any you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kaiser. Mayor Williams, are we going to have questions after all the panelists have presented? I didn't see any instructions that said that. Okay, great. The answer is yes. Okay, I'm really happy to introduce our next speaker, Francine Waters, who is someone I know through her, I believe, remarkable work on the White Flint Partners in the White Flint Sector Plan that the Council passed a few months back. When we talk about the Purple Line and transit projects, in my opinion, it's really important to involve as many of the stakeholders in the community as you can, and I believe that the White Flint Partners was an awesome example of how it can be done. It was very successful. So she's got an amazing resume. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We'd be here for a while, but I will read the parts I think are most important here. Francine Waters is a transportation demand management and marketing specialist with over 25 years of experience both in the private and public sector. Most recently, Ms. Waters, as a member of the White Flint Partnership, actively worked for the approval by Montgomery County of the White Flint Sector Plan and White Flint Development District, and conducted collaborative planning efforts for White Flint and surrounding communities with a grassroots outreach campaign for smart growth and sustainable development in White Flint. Ms. Waters, as the chair of the partnership's outreach committee, developed, organized, and implemented the televised White Flint Partnership Speaker Series. She is an internationally recognized speaker on transportation demand management, speaking at the European Conference on Mobility Management in Belgium, and more locally at Leadership Washington, the National Press Club, Lead in Transportation Green Business Opportunities at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, Design DC, and BizNow's The Future of Rockville Pike. Currently, Ms. Waters holds the positions of Managing Director of Transportation Smart Growth for Lerner Enterprises and Senior Director of Transportation Planning for the Washington Nationals Baseball Club. Ms. Waters is the Executive Director of the White Flint Partnership, a member of the Association for Commuter Transportation, Urban Land Institute, Institute of Transportation Engineers, American Business Association, and Leadership Montgomery 500. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We'll be here for a while. So I would like to welcome Ms. Waters and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to share the story of the White Flint Partnership, and the true word that we want to focus in is partnership. Working with Montgomery County Councilwoman Valerie Irvin and the council in putting forth this vision and working collaboratively to see this vision come to fruition. The White Flint Sector Plan, that's what started, frankly, the White Flint Partnership. It's 430 acres. To give you an idea, it's larger than the city of Bethesda. Back in some 2006, 2008, the county was looking at preparing a new sector plan. At that time, these developers who make up the partnership got together and said individually we could redevelop our own properties with the approval of the sector plan. But if we were to get together, if we were to work together, we could actually develop a vision for all of White Flint, not just for our individual properties. And as you note from the developers that you see here, there's some very major developers here in the region that are part of this partnership. I represent Lerner Enterprises. We own White Flint Mall. White Flint Mall is the largest piece of property within White Flint. It's about the size, again, for comparison purposes, of Roslyn. So we're talking about a very large area. This is what it looks like today. You have your aerial view, and on your left you have the road network. When the partnership got together and they decided that they were going to work towards a vision, what was the vision? Well, we reached out to the community, and what I'm hearing from Councilwoman Irvin and what I've heard from Marcia, community is so very vitally important, and that's why we're here today, to talk about community and what does the community want? What does the community see their future? The partnership reached out to the community, to the residential community, and without any hesitation or doubt, the issue immediately came up, Rockville Pike. Rockville Pike was the knife that separated the community. As you can see from the diagram on the left, it just cuts right through it. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've all heard through the news that even recently there have been several fatalities of pedestrians crossing Rockville Pike. Rockville Pike is not only the issue here, but if you look at the road network, the road, big blocks, hard for people to. I remember talking to somebody who lived right in Garrett Park who were within feet of White Flint Mall that had to get in their car to drive around to go to White Flint Mall instead of just walking to White Flint Mall. And the reason for that was because of the road network. There was no place to walk. This is part of our outreach efforts. We had a series we called Speaker Series, bringing in EPA, Roland Stanley, former Governor Paris Glendening, Smart Growth. What could we do with this area? We hired Gladding Jackson, now AECOM, to work with the community to discover what was the best vision that would incorporate transportation, making Rockville Pike not the knife, but the spine of this community, and making Rockville Pike a sustainable transportation corridor. One of the visions that everyone rallied around was Rockville Pike. Dedicated bus rapid transit in the center lanes, dedicated bike lane, 6 rows of trees, wide sidewalks, and it will fit within existing Rockville Pike. But it wasn't, again, just the Pike, it was the entire network. So the partnership worked together to develop a network of streets. This is not following property owners' lines. The property owners actually got together and said, okay, we'll run a street here, we'll give you 6 feet, we'll take 8 feet, we'll work together to make sure that the roads actually go through. And why is this important? Because you need to have circulation. There needs to be balance, not only with the public transportation, bicycling, but automotive balance as well. So automotive traffic can percolate through the system, but it also benefits pedestrian movement, because now instead of having those huge super blocks, you have a much more direct route to services and to your job. This is the vision of Rockville Pike, the 21st Century Boulevard. And as you can see, the dedicated transitway, the parked cars. One thing that we're very proud of is our dedicated bike lane. If you note in the diagram here, the bike lane is to basically to the left, to the right of the cars, so that bicyclists don't get doored as they ride by parked cars. It's a protection also for pedestrians having parked cars. The bike lane also bulbs out as it crosses intersections so that automotive traffic can see the bicyclists and the bicyclists can see automotive traffic. It doesn't take away any of the through lanes on Rockville Pike. It really becomes the centerpiece of the community. It defines a sense of place, which is lacking or was lacking in White Flint. And with the support of County Council, with the support of Park and Planning, this sector plan was approved, and we are now moving forward to put that vision, implement that vision. And how does this all work together in terms of cost? One of the things that was also very monumental about White Flint was that the development community agreed to self-tax themselves. And a development district was put into place. That development district will generate $169 million. The development community themselves agreed, in terms of the network, street network, is another $280 million, and the county had agreed to put in $152 million. There is $618 million worth of transportation infrastructure, new transportation infrastructure in White Flint. These are the improvements. It's a phased project. It will go on for the next 30 years. The sector plan, the new sector plan, will add an additional approximately 10,000 new housing units, 19,000 new full-time jobs. That does not include part-time or construction jobs. We are very excited. The partnership is very excited about the true partnership, the true community effort that we have accomplished here. And I see Cheryl here in the audience. We really made every effort to reach out to all the stakeholders on this project. And we're very excited and very humbled, and we are so looking forward to seeing this vision implemented in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francine. There are a couple of people in the audience that I need to introduce. I was remiss before. And we have someone here representing Congresswoman Donna Edwards' office, Selena Singleton, in the audience. Thank you for being here, Selena. And Rebecca Lord representing Councilmember Nancy Florine. Okay, so next up is Kate Bollinger from BBP and Associates, LLC. Ms. Bollinger is a senior associate with BBP and Associates based in Annapolis, Maryland. Ms. Bollinger specializes in economic development and real estate analysis for both the public and private sectors. One of her primary areas of expertise is transit-oriented development, as she regularly conducts real estate market and economic impact assessments for transit-related projects. Ms. Bollinger was part of a team of consultants that analyzed redevelopment opportunities for the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads area. She is currently part of a multidisciplinary team planning for transit supportive redevelopment for the Herndon, Virginia Silver Line station area. As a marketing analyst on a team working in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, she is also currently evaluating transit-oriented development opportunities related to multiple transit modes: light rail transit, commuter rail transit, and bus rapid transit. Ms. Follinger.
Thank you, Valerie. I should also add that I am a senior associate working under Jim Prost, founding principal of BVP, who offers over 35 years of experience doing this type of work. And Jim really wanted to make it here this morning, but unfortunately got tied up in jury duty. So I guess that's appropriate for April Fool's Day. But nevertheless, I am going to tell you about the different factors that impact real estate development, transit-oriented development opportunities from our perspective, and also try to put mode in its place. What does the mode of transit have to do with the overall degree and level of opportunity? So the opportunity for the Purple Line in a lot of the station areas, particularly in Tacoma Park, is going to be an opportunity for transit-oriented redevelopment. So this presents perhaps more challenges than greenfield sites, but also could be more opportunities in that this is a close-in community with lots of additional access coming to a great region. So the different modes that we consult on include heavy rail transit, subway systems, light rail, but also commuter rail, such as the MARC train, that operate only in the peak, early morning, and evening rush hours for the most part. And then finally, bus rapid transit, which is a newer mode that is becoming of interest in a lot of communities across the nation because it often is much more less expensive and flexible to implement, can also be phased and then converted to light rail in the future. But specifically for this presentation, I want to focus on light rail and whether light rail implies a lighter form of TOD, or can light rail result in heavier, more higher density development that we often associate with heavy rail subway systems. And from our research, that includes looking at national, federal level publications, the Transportation Research Board, the Urban Land Institute, representing the developer perspective, and then also our anecdotal evidence, our conversations with economic development, transit, planning practitioners from across the country. We believe that there are 5 key factors that impact LRT and its ability to support TOD. So I'm going to go into each of these, but they include service, so the level of service and the advantage that the transit system offers, land availability for development or redevelopment, the interest and engagement of the private sector, which of course is tied to the market, and then finally the public sector, which has a big role to play. So the first factor is the level of rail service that's offered and the transportation advantage. So light rail, to the degree that it can be high capacity, fast, reliable, frequent, that it is designed with high quality, strong features, that's an attractive environment, as I think Marcia showed from the renderings that she has for the Purple Line. That will all go to boost the image and perception of light rail and ultimately increase ridership. Another big factor that perhaps is a drawback of a very successful economic region, but a positive thing for transit, is auto congestion, which makes light rail more appealing to commuters. Second factor is land availability. Within walking distance, usually a quarter mile to half mile, 5 to 10 minute walk of a transit station. We've worked in all types of communities, from areas such as this one, which has a lot of greenfield, open development, to communities like Tacoma Park, where it's more of a redevelopment proposition. but the ability to achieve redevelopment, of course, has to do with the willingness of property owners, their interest in participating, their ability, as in White Flint, to work together, and their perception that transit is going to result in additional value for them and their tenants. It also has to do with the interest of developers. I think the D.C. region is lucky in that we have a lot of developers that are already experienced with mixed-use development and with transit-oriented development. And developer and property owners' ability to attract an anchor tenant also can go a long way to impacting the overall level of development that's realized. We've seen in some instances where property owner developer ends up with a federal agency, and that can become a huge game changer for the amount of development that's realized. The fourth factor is market strength. In many of the case studies that Marcia brought up, you'll find a strong economy that's behind support for transit-oriented development. And the D.C. region, of course, is often at the top of the list across the nation for household employment growth because of the federal government, defense contracting, all of the positive factors that we have going on here. Another element of the market for transit that other non-transit sites don't have, of course, is ridership, and transit riders can generate some activity that supports retail sales, as Marcia pointed out, but it's usually the icing on the cake. You can't support a large retail development on transit riders alone. And the fifth factor is the support of the public sector. Public sector has a major role to play, first in shaping land use policies and allowable density, determining which land uses are going to be permitted in the area, but also what additional incentives will be offered. You can offer bonus densities, investment in infrastructure that sets the stage for development, direct incentives, financing, funding, tax abatements, tax credits, expedited permitting, so getting developers the chance to break ground sooner, and then finally also generating neighborhood support by conveying the benefits of all of this. So the key effects that we found in our work is that higher density is certainly possible with light rail transit, and as Marcia had pointed out, there are a lot of positive factors associated with light rail that's been documented in various regions across the country, and that includes rental rate premiums as well as higher land values. So Dallas's light rail system, researchers have found that office and retail rents near light rail are upwards of 40% higher than non-light rail comparables. They also found that land values rose faster for those properties than the non-rail served properties. In Portland, the light rail system has generated many success stories, and it's also generated higher land values within walking distance of stations. And then the third example that I want to call to your attention is actually a bus rapid transit example, but to show you that, in fact, there are a lot of development opportunities associated with this mode as well. Which kind of drives the point that all of those other factors working together can result in pretty intense development opportunities. So in Boston, the Silver Line BRT system is a line that links downtown to Logan Airport and the waterfront. So by virtue of linking those major activity centers and opening up a new area for development, the BRT system has helped to support 4 million square feet that has already been built and another 9 million square feet that's planned. So to summarize, all of the transit modes can certainly have opportunities for TOD, but the degree of that opportunity, whether it's lighter or more intense, has to do with a combination of factors working together. And from our perspective, the DC region and the Purple Line has a lot of factors working together. It's a new line that's going to exist within the context of a highly connected system, giving new access to major employment centers and also ultimately to another airport, to Dulles and the international community. It's a high-capacity line that is going to offer fast and reliable service. The traffic congestion certainly, we think, will help support ridership. This is an area where developers have experience with mixed-use development, with TOD. It's a relatively strong economy, and the communities, the public sector agencies, are working on a variety of plans to support TOD. And then finally, I'd add that Tacoma-Langley Crossroads has a special identity in this region as a multicultural hub, so opportunities to support and reinforce that with TOD are of interest.
Thank you, Kate. Before I introduce the next speaker, there are other people in the audience that I did not introduce. And to my colleagues from the Tacoma Park City Council, Fred Schultz is here, and so is Ruben Snipper. And Jonathan Jays Green is here in the front row representing Delegate Sheila Hickson's office. Thank you for being here. Okay, next up is Dr. Jarrett Knapp. He is the Executive Director of the National Center for Smart Growth Research and Education. He is an economist and professor of urban studies and planning in the University of Maryland School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. He is also director of the Environmental Finance Center and the Transportation Policy Research Group. He is an ex officio member of the Governor's Smart Growth Subcabinet. Dr. Knapp is the author of more than 75 articles and 7 books on state and local land use planning and economics. His research interests include the economics and politics of land use planning and efficacy of economic development instruments and impacts of environmental policy. He is co-author, editor, and co-editor of 7 books: Land Market Monitoring for Smart Urban Growth, Environmental Program Evaluation, Spatial Development in Indonesia, The Regulated Landscape, Lessons on State Land Use Planning from Oregon, Partnerships for Smart Growth, University Community Collaboration for Better Public Spaces, Incentives, Regulations, and Plans, The Role of States and Nation-States in Smart Growth Planning, and Planning in the Face of Markets, a Guide to Land Use Planning in a Market Economy. He received the 2006 Outstanding Planner Award from the Maryland chapter of the American Planning Association. He earned his B.S. from Willamette University, his M.S. and Ph.D. from the University of Oregon, and received a postdoctoral training at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, all in economics. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm your lemon-sucking economist. I'm also the sort of boring academic who's gonna finish up this panel. And I'm the token male on the panel, and it appears. And if Kate is a senior staff member on her in her firm, I must be a fossil or something. So, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to give you a little bit of overview. I'm going to repeat a lot of what was said before, but I'm going to provide, I think, you with a little bit of new information, provide some context about the transit system in Maryland and what that might imply for development here in Tacoma-Langley. So, what is transit-oriented development? You've heard a lot about this. Transit-oriented development is synergism between land use and transit. We've emphasized, I think the panel has emphasized the relationship between land use and transit. The land use piece is really critical. Of course, we need land use that's mixed use, pedestrian-friendly, and supporting a variety of transit options. It's not simply good enough to have development near the transit center, but you want the right kinds of development. TOD's core features, of course, include residential, retail, office, commercial, institutional, thoughtful and well-designed spaces, existing pedestrian-friendly places to live, work, and play. The benefits of transit-oriented development, you've heard much of this already before. Increased ridership, improved air quality, more opportunities for neighborhood connections, sense of community, reduced household fuel costs. We've got great examples of this from Francine. Talked about the potential from Marcia, so we know that these benefits are possible. We can promote active, safe, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods, remove some of the pedestrian unfriendliness of places like Rockville Pike, increase value for income and property values. Lots of potential benefits from TOD. You've heard about some of the potential economic benefits before. Kate emphasized the need for public-private interface, that we need the right kind of land use, we need the right kind of incentives, we need the right kind of public sector activity. So, and when we have those things, we can enhance tax revenues, we can expand markets, we can increase development, and all these other good things. Who will live near transit stations? Often it tends to be folks without children. It's not clear that that's going to be the case in this jurisdiction. I think that'll be one of the very interesting things about this particular transit station. Households in the past, at least, with children account for only about 20% of the demand for TOD. So it is certainly true that the competition for residential location in TOD areas tends to be won by the people without kids. You've heard a lot of these examples before. There are great examples in Washington, in Portland, in Dallas, in St. Louis, and in Charlotte where TOD has resulted in substantial investments of a variety of types. In fact, we did some of this work in Portland back when we were Oregonians. So that's background, right? So we know that TOD can provide all these important benefits. What is the context, right? I mean, what does it suggest about the potential for TOD and the Purple Line in this particular region? You know, Maryland has some really strong and extensive transit assets. In fact, among the best in the country. Transit ridership in the state of Maryland is among the highest in the country. So we've got a lot to work with, actually. There are about 110 existing transit stations in this state. Right? They occur on the MARC line, on the MTA light rail line, on the WMATA Metro Rail system, and it goes throughout the state of Maryland, as we know. So what do we know about these? We have created a website which presents a lot of smart growth indicators. This is a website that we created about 3 years ago, and so some of the data is a little aged. It's listed as a beta site because we never actually got the funding to complete the site and maintain the data, but I think the data is still pretty useful for you to look up. The URL is www.indicatorproject.com. So if you can't see the data that I'm going to present to you, you can simply go to that website and take a look at it for yourself. I know some of the fonts tend to be rather small. But we've got a lot of data up here about our transit system. So one piece of data is the percent of the population living within a half mile of a transit station. And we can see that Baltimore clearly is the jurisdiction, if we define jurisdictions as counties and cities, that has the greatest percentage of people. Sorry?
Just talk a little bit more towards
More toward the mic, sorry. I tend to wonder. Okay. That's okay. I'll try to stay put. Okay. So Baltimore City has the greatest percentage of its population, but Montgomery County is, of course, next. If we look at ridership, all right, the data for ridership, this is 2007 ridership, so as I said, it's a little bit dated. But one of the interesting things here is to describe the Purple Line, it's going to connect Silver Spring and Bethesda, and these are two of the stations in the WMATA system that have the highest ridership. So it's not surprising that we expect a lot of ridership on the Portland Line. I'm sorry, not the Portland, the Purple Line. Right, because it's connecting two of the busiest transit stops, right? So it's not surprising, again, that we get a lot of volume, and a lot of that volume is going to be between Bethesda and Silver Spring. If we look at the jobs, all right, within a half mile of the metro station, you can see that Bethesda and Silver Spring, once again, have the highest number of jobs. Right, so again, not surprising that a line that connects these two locations will result in a lot of ridership, and that lot of ridership will probably be during the day. Right, when people are at work and want to connect with their colleagues in either Silver Spring or Bethesda or Rockville or Twinbrook, you know, most of the jobs, and many of the jobs that are concentrated around transit stations are on the red line. If we once again look at the population living within a half mile of a transit station, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Prince George's Plaza are again among the leaders in this. If we look at, again, the total number of people who live within a half mile of a metro station. So again, the Purple Line really ideally situated for success within the transit network context. All right, this is a bit of a strange one. No, not this one. It's the next one. This is population density. Right, so one of the critical features for success of a transit system is to have population density near the station. Once again, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Tacoma. A lot of the higher densities within a half mile of the transit stations are within this particular narrow region. All right, this is somewhat of an odd one. This is the percent of average county density in the transit area. Right, so if you look at the Silver Spring, for example, it says 754%. Right? What that means is that the density in the Silver Spring metro station is 754 times the average density in Montgomery County. Right? So it's not that we have high overall densities in Montgomery County, but we have these spikes of densities right around the metro stations. Right? And that's what you need in order for success of the metro. You don't need uniformly high densities. Right? What you need is concentrated densities around the station areas. Parking. The question of how much parking to put near your stations is a very critical one. One of the interesting things about this particular diagram is that most of the parking, the places with the most parking, are at the ends of the line. Okay? And so when you begin thinking about where do we need parking and how much parking do we need at the various stations here, the logic, of course, is if you want to pick up the people who are not living near the metro system, you want to put the parking at the ends of the line so people can get to the ends of the line and then ride along the line. So Shady Grove, Greenbelt, New Carrollton, Branch Avenue are the places with the most parking. All right, we did some work also for MDOT on employment capacity. What we were looking at here is not just, as I showed you before, how much employment there exists within these transit stations, but what is the ability to accommodate more jobs within the transit stations. And we looked particularly at the zoning. Right? And we looked at the zoning in the transit station areas, and we looked at how much employment density there currently was in particular zones, and assumed that the vacant land in the transit stations would get about the same density that the current zoning has. Right? That's not really the maximum allowed, not the maximum potential necessarily, but is a technique that tries to get at, all right, if the densities remain roughly the same, how much capacity do we have to add additional employment within the station areas? This one's a little difficult to see. The point is that on the Baltimore line here, there's a lot of employment capacity that is underutilized. Right? Certain places in the Baltimore line have a lot of job capacity, but there's a lot of job capacity that remains underutilized on the light rail line in Baltimore. That's also true in the MARC stations, actually, right? That there are many places in the MARC stations where the zoning allows for a lot more job development, but the job development isn't quite there yet. Right? So there's more work to be done in terms of utilizing the existing capacity in the MARC stations around the state of Maryland. If we look at capacity utilization at the WMATA stations, here where Montgomery County really looks good. Right? The height of the pink line there shows you what the existing jobs are at the WMATA stations, and the green is how much additional capacity there is. Right? So Montgomery County is really using its capacity well, and you can see it's got a lot of jobs right around the metro stations. You can see that on the Prince George's side, it's not quite as good. Right? That not only is there not as many jobs around the transit stations, but the capacity, at least at the time this study was done in terms of the zoning, is not there as well, and so we need to do more to try to increase the zone capacity to allow for more development. I want to go into the details of this. The point is that we have estimated the employment capacity in every system in the state and how much employment capacity there is. And you can see that the percent of employment capacity in these stations ranges from 21% to 39% around the Baltimore light rail line, 21% in MARC, and 19% on the WMATA. So we have additional employment capacity, and we have underutilized capacity yet in many of the transit station areas in Maryland. If we combine that and look at the relationship between how many jobs we have now in the state and how many new jobs we're expecting, and how many new jobs we expect within the 9 counties that have stations, we estimated that there is about the capacity to accommodate 30% of the anticipated job growth within the station areas in those 9 counties, right? So we've got a lot of capacity yet to absorb in terms of how many jobs we could absorb around the station areas. So 30% of the anticipated job growth in these 9 counties we could accommodate within the transit station areas, and 25% of all the job growth we anticipate for the state of Maryland over the next 30 years, we have the capacity to absorb within the station areas. So, a summary of this study that I just was talking about. So existing employment densities in Maryland transit station areas vary extensively. I think one of the messages, I think, from this panel is that no two TODs are alike. They all have a lot of capacity to do good things, but how well they perform depends on how hard you work at it. So over 95 jobs per acre at stations in the Baltimore Metro line to under 30 jobs per acre at stations on the MARC line. A lot of job capacity still exists in Montgomery County, and part of the reason for that is because the zoning capacity is really quite high. But the largest amount of undeveloped but developable land exists in Prince George's County. Right? So we've got a lot of land yet in Prince George's County that has the ability to absorb more jobs, but those jobs aren't quite being absorbed yet. So even if there were no increase in employment density, there exists within Maryland's 110 transit stations enough capacity to accommodate about 154% of all anticipated employment growth in the region. Right? 24% of all anticipated employment in the state from now until 2030. So we've got more capacity to absorb jobs in the station areas. So to conclude, right, station areas are capable of doing tremendous capacity to do good things. Right? Every one of the panelists, I think, emphasized this point. Station areas really are tremendous assets they can do a lot of good things with. The good things include increases in property values, rents, livability, environmental improvement, and more. Kate and others emphasize these things very much. And there are great examples, not only in places like Portland and Dallas and the Boston corridor, but we've got great examples right here in the state of Maryland. Right, but TODs have limited capacity to create market potentials where markets are weak. Right? To expect that the TODs are going to turn around a market where a market exists is expecting a lot out of a TOD. Right? So we need to have strong markets in order to have strong TODs. Even if you build it and if you zone it, they still might not come. Right? And part of the message here is that we have tremendous TOD assets in this state, but a lot of them are still underutilized. Right? And so just creating a TOD, just zoning it for higher density, just zoning it for higher job capacity doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to achieve it. Jobs, I think, are often the overlooked element of successful TODs. There's a lot of talk about transit-oriented development, and most of it is focused on residential. Some preliminary work we've done suggests that the ridership on transit is perhaps more a function of the jobs you can get to, right, than the households you can come from. Right? So it's really important that we have employment capacity, we have successful economic development around the station areas. The good news about that is we've got all the ingredients around here. We do have strong markets. We have supported public policy. We have active engagement, as we can see by the folks in the room. Right? But I want to close with the notion that it will be what you make of it. Right? Just because you're going to put a transit station here doesn't mean it's going to be a great place and it's going to provide all the benefits that you hope it will. It depends on all the things Kate talked about, right? And probably the most important of those things is the extent to which the community engages and provides the support of public policy and the public policy investments that makes that succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Knapp. And I'm going to ask Mayor Williams, is this the time when we're going to open this up for questions? Okay, before I do that, Congressman Van Hollen's office is represented this morning. Julius West, thanks for being here. So is there a place where people can come to a microphone? There you go. There are people in the audience with microphones, so we'll start over here in this corner.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Brian Kelly. I was part of the Master Plan Advisory Group for the Purple Line, Montgomery County, and I'm Prince George's Chamber of Commerce since about 1999. And a couple questions. One, you said build it and they might not come. I think you can correlate school systems in Baltimore and Prince George's County as part of the problem that wasn't touched on, but there hasn't been development as there has been in other counties. The question I have, mostly directed for Marcia possibly, is I think we have a big bog down in the central business district of Silver Spring, and I have encouraged and still advocate for exploring the aerial possibility over the CBD, over Georgia Avenue. I think the Purple Line is going to fail in traffic in Silver Spring. I have a lot of experience taking my daughter to ballet there for 5 years at rush hours. So that's a question that it has not been looked at, but I believe that elevating the line and having integrating the library and the transit center as places, locations for access to an elevated system should be considered. They want a bridge anyway. Let's get a whole Roslyn type or some kind of aerial way to get across the CBD. And thirdly is the displacement of the very ridership that we want to keep in Langley Park. All of you said how it increases property values, increases values, and guess what? That makes it unaffordable. It makes it unaffordable for the people who depend on transit the most, the people who gave the strongest ridership numbers to Tacoma Langley. So we have to deal with that problem. A lot of the garden apartments there, housing, have been updated on the Montgomery side, but on the Prince George's side, there's plans for, as you said, redevelopment. And what will that bring? I grew up in Washington. We did the Southwest waterfront, and what did that bring? It was not a great success. So these are questions for planners and for politicians to ponder. I actually have to leave and get to a job site, but thank you for letting me go first.
Thank you very much. Marcia, did you want to respond? I think you're just going automatically.
Okay.
Yeah.
First, I think you brought up the issue of being stuck in traffic. That is something we're going through an analysis with FTA, and we will through the preliminary engineering. There are all kind of techniques you can do to give the light rail preferential treatment in moving through the traffic, and those are options we will be working with as we move into the next phase. Light rail is working successfully in other cities that are just as congested in parts of the city, and they've been able to deal with that issue through some of the technologies that will be put into a system like this. In terms of, as I said, transit benefit for those that are transit dependent, I brought up the issue that both counties are working on sector plans in the Tacoma Langley area. We've been working closely with them. Both efforts are very open and transparent to the public. I'm hoping that those that are concerned about not being able to afford are weighing in and getting involved in those planning processes. Meanwhile, the state is working with both counties to see how, as a transit agency, we don't have any authority in land use planning, but to see how we can help the counties look at that when they're dealing with their sector plans.
I actually want to respond to something you said, which I jotted down a note prior to the question, and that is having the panelists ponder the question of who are the users of transit. And the reason why I really appreciate having Francine here is because there was a lot of attention paid to the community and the folks who actually will be using the transit. And I think that's really important because if you look around the room, the people who are actually on the buses and the trains aren't here. They're at work, and they're probably going to work 3 jobs. And they're going to be on those buses and trains until late into the evening. As far as the planner, there's a planner in the room from Park and Planning, but the Tacoma Langley plan is a bi-county master plan, the first of its kind, and I think about 50 years, 30 years, it's been a long time since that's been done. The Prince George's side finished their master plan before we got around to ours, and the reason why it's being held up is because there have been some issues from the community that need to be addressed, and so we're asking all of those questions. What's going to happen if you think that after we pass a master plan and things begin to move, there is going to be some change And unless you want nothing to happen and nothing to change and rents to stay where they are, I just think that that's really unrealistic. Things will change. And our job as policymakers is to make sure that that change doesn't create such a problem that there is flight out of these neighborhoods. And so these are all the difficult questions that we deal with every day. And so as far as the Purple Line goes, I think it was really important when the Purple Line Now, which I used to sit in those meetings for years, really began to focus on the end user population. And as you saw in the census that just came out, a lot of the people who we're talking about aren't necessarily the people who get to weigh in and determine their own destiny. So we need to really be clear about paying attention to those people.
If I could add a little bit on that, where you're going to be seeing MTA getting out in the communities very soon is we've broken the quarter into what we call 28 neighborhoods. And we're going to be having work sessions, work groups in each of those neighborhoods where we're going to be dealing with issues, access, how it impacts your neighborhood. And some of these issues will come up. As I said, this MTA doesn't have the ability to deal with it, but we are working extremely closely with the counties, both Park and Planning and the transportation agencies for the counties are part of those meetings. We will be in the Tacoma-Langley area in due time, working on small neighborhoods. Most of our meetings prior to approval of the locally preferred alternative were rather large meetings. We want to get down into the neighborhood and find out where those issues are and work with you to deal with them before they become greater insurmountable issues.
Okay, next question.
As a 25-year supporter of the use of this corridor, and having seen a lot of the rail lines, as a 25-year supporter, and having seen a lot of the rail lines that were pictured, I'd like a little more emphasis on the fact that transit-oriented development doesn't mean the same thing at each of the stations along the Purple Line. I think that's a big fear of a lot of the communities and neighborhoods, and you really haven't addressed that at all.
Who wants to take that? Go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, I can start. In a lot of communities that we work in, there are generally typologies that are applied across the corridor. So we know that not every station is going to be a major urban redevelopment employment hub. Not every station can be a major retail or entertainment destination. There are also suburban, neighborhood formats, different land use mixes, different densities that can be provided, although the challenge in an area that's already built out is to identify some of those more moderate densities that can still allow the financial incentive for redevelopment. So I think that might be a challenge for some of the communities here.
Also, the Purple Line is going through a lot of neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. We believe it's the intent of the counties through the planning sector plans that are going on is to keep those as residential neighborhoods. I'm thinking of the Dale Drive, Wayne. There is no movement to change any of the land use in that area. Our concern will be, how do the people that live on Wayne and Dale, how do they get to it so they can use it? Not how do we go in there and disrupt what is primarily a residential community. That's where the sector plans come in, and working with the planning departments and us coordinating with them. Where should the more dense development happen?
It's a great question, Barbara, and I know for a fact that, especially in my neighborhood, there's a fear of upzoning along the alignment. And that's why we're having this conversation today. I'm sure a listserv is already cranking up right now saying, oh my God, there they are talking about, development along the Purple Line alignment. We actually, the council signed onto a letter that I wrote to go back to the community to say to them, we have no plans to upzone along this alignment, especially as it travels through neighborhoods. It's very unusual. This is extraordinary, isn't it, to have a transit line run through neighborhoods. And so there is great fear about, okay, all of a sudden you're going to be on Dale Drive and Wayne Avenue, and they're going to be, I don't know, skyscrapers. I don't know. But, so, we have to alleviate the fear of the people that live in those communities that we're not trying to change their communities. We're trying to make it better for them to be able to move about. Does anybody else want to make a comment?
Yeah, I guess I would comment on that. There's a balance here, obviously, that has to be achieved. That the transit system to work well, the line to work well, there has to be activity along the line. So you need activity. As I said before, it will be what you make of it, and I certainly believe that to be true. But and I don't know about this letter. I don't know what it says, and I don't.
Well, it's only in the neighborhoods that it's going
so,
to. Once it gets past Arliss. And that's when it becomes something different. But as it's traveling through between Georgia Avenue on Wayne till it gets to Arliss, that's a neighborhood.
Okay.
Whereas,
As well as Weston.
And Weston, exactly.
Yes.
So there are neighborhoods that will be directly impacted, and obviously fear of what that change means to them. So I have to.
I understand. I would be cautious about sort of a blanket statement of no upzoning and no new taxes.
Only in a certain area. Okay. So no fear on either side.
Not far from here. She's right. The listservs are moving already. But no, that's a good policy decision that's been made. And
okay, next question.
My name is Bob Colvin, and my concern, of course, is the financial situation we have now in Montgomery County. I think we pay something like $278 million a year in interest on our current bonds, and I'm concerned, what is Montgomery's cost going to be for this part of the Purple Line, and how is it going to affect our financial future?
Well, I don't know what Montgomery's portion of this of the Purple Line is going to be. We have representatives here from members of Congress, and I was recently at a meeting at Congresswoman Donna Edwards' office, and she made it very clear to me that we're dealing in a new normal on Capitol Hill in terms of the support we have for transit projects. Since we have a Republican-controlled Congress, they're more interested in building roads than they are in building transit. Now, this is a long-term strategic question about how we're going to fund this project and other projects. So if anybody else wants to weigh in on that, I don't really know where we are in terms of the queue to get even any federal dollars.
Well, hopefully with that approval to move in preliminary engineering, the federal dollars start. But that does not include the approval for construction. We will have to demonstrate the state as to how this project can be financially feasible before we get federal approval to move from preliminary engineering into the final design and construction phase. We are about 2 years from that and working very closely with both counties, with FDA, and looking at other innovative ways to find funding. We are at a much different stage in transportation funding, period. It used to be you could go to FTA and ask for a project like this and know that you could easily get 80% of it funded by the federal government. Now we're being told to not even ask for anything more than 50%. Mm-hmm. So we have to figure out how to make up at least 50%. We're going to fare better if we can find revenue streams that'll bring our request below 50%. We're working very hard. We have some innovative financing experts working with us, but we're about 2 years out from having the answers of how this will be funded.
I think one of the important reasons we have Francine here is because we're going to have to look at creative ways of financing all of these projects. And I think that the White Flint Partnership was an extraordinary example of what could actually be done when, the government partners with private industry and residents to develop what you all were able to develop in White Flint. So we're going to have to think differently and do things a lot more creatively.
Good morning. My name is Freddy Garcia. I live in Montgomery County for the last 25 years. And I have been in the Tacoma Park area all of these years. And we have faced a very serious concern about pedestrians in the crossroad of University Boulevard and New Hampshire Avenue.
Right.
And I don't know what is it that we're going to do to get rid of the people in there or educate them. Because I'm serious when I say educate them, because I'm a Salvadorian myself, and according to the census, Tacoma Park has the largest population of Salvadorian people in the United States. And they're all like me, uneducated. I just got my GED last year.
Congratulations.
But when we're talking about getting a large population of metro line in this corner, we're going to have a lot of people. Because, we have built a fence, but it's not fence going to stop us to get in the metro or something. We have to run it. And the only way is either have a law enforcement more effectively or educate them that the fence is there to be not jump or as a symbol, because we jump a bigger fence to come into the country. And that 6-foot fence is not going to stop us.
Right.
So my concern is how many more people they're going to have accident before we do something.
That's exactly one of the questions we'll be dealing with in those neighborhood groups I talked about. You're right, New Hampshire and University is probably the highest pedestrian accident in the state, and have been having a lot of focus on this serious issue for many years. We're aware of that, and we know we have to work with the community as well as with enforcement and the safety experts as we design this. One of the reasons we're hoping to have the light rail in the median, in the middle of the road, at that intersection, is because we believe by only having to cross half the road instead of the whole road, it's going to make it a little bit safer and easier to get there. We're going to have to deal with the issues of education, and maybe it's a partnership that the state and the locals can put together to develop some educational programs. I know growing up, I grew up in an urban area, and we always had education on walking safely. Look left, was it look right, look left, look right before you cross, or which maybe it's the opposite way. But I don't know we do that anymore. And you're right, when you have a transient population coming in that doesn't understand our customs and how we do it, we need to spend more time in educating. And this will certainly be one issue that we'll work with the county on, figuring out how we can help deal with that, because we are just as concerned as you on those safety issues.
I really appreciate the question, and I wanted to ask Erwin Mack, who's sitting here on the front, if someone could give him a microphone, who's been working, the gentleman right here in the corner, who has been working in the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads area on this particular issue for a long time. So if Erwin can sort of speak to the gentleman's question and his issue.
He couldn't have asked a more vital question than what do we do about the pedestrians at the intersection of University and New Hampshire, which for many years was blighted with the reputation of being the third most dangerous intersection in the state of Maryland. I serve as a bit of a historian, having received a phone call from Governor Glendenning's office too many years ago saying, I want to make an announcement at the crossroads about the plan to put the Purple Line there. That's how far back we go. I've also had reservations in for a walker to get on the Purple Line, and being of an advanced age, the archaic age at that time. We do face, and I also currently serve as the chairman of the Montgomery County Pedestrian Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, which clearly has a concern about the word education. We discovered how little people know about what is available in Montgomery County at a recent joint meeting, when we thought people would know what that they don't know. And the challenge we have, of course, is the multi-political intersection that we face in trying to get two counties to work together to educate a populace who has brought plenty of pleasure and business to our intersection. Education, education, education. We've reduced the number of deaths from a horrendous number to a couple, but in spite of the $7 million that's been spent at an intersection. And clearly we're working with Mike Madden and others to say what will happen to the fencing the gentleman referred to, which we don't like to put in, but it's the only way we could redirect people to an appropriate place to cross the street. What will happen when the Purple Line comes in? That's going to be another challenge. So thank you for all the caring you're giving to the particular intersection that I represent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mack. Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Karen Simons. I'm pretty much a lifelong resident of Montgomery County, primarily in Silver Spring, and currently live near downtown Silver Spring. And I'm also a regular user of Metro. So I have two questions, and this all ties to funding and current news events. The gentleman back there asked about what's the county's portion of the Purple Line, and the response was didn't know, and the state was talking to it. There actually is a component to the Purple Line project that is supposed to be funded by the county, and that's the Capitol Crescent Trail, which is currently estimated at $65 million that the county would have to come up with. And currently the Purple Line at $1.5 million in 2010 dollars is slated to be funded half by the state and half by the federal government. So big news item today is Metro has to consider what to do. They can't meet their budget. Do they cut funding to certain low-use bus lines? Do they raise, ridership rates? We have an infrastructure within the current mass transit system of Metro that is crumbling. Escalators have constant issues. It is not we can't financially support that system today, and we're looking to take on yet more transit systems that require more infrastructure, O&M money, that when we can't support our existing infrastructure. So there's a lot going on with the money perspective, coupled with the county's rezoning efforts. There's a lot going on at once, and it doesn't seem to be supportable. Just would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, obviously, Montgomery County is no different from any other jurisdiction in the country in terms of how the economy has impacted local government's ability to fund their own budgets. That's not just, it's not unique to Montgomery County or to the state of Maryland. But having said that, we are always going to be looking toward the future, and we're going to have to continue to look at ways to move people, whether that be transit, roads, bus, whatever the bicycles, whatever the walking, sidewalks, whatever the mode of transportation is, we have a responsibility to continue to move toward the future. We can see that gas is already $4 a gallon, and it will continue to rise. More and more people who are moving to the Silver Spring area are looking for ways to not have to have a car. So no matter what's happening around us, we are in a planning and for the future mode. And so it is going to create a lot of stress and a lot of, there are going to be a lot of people with a lot of anxiety in terms of how we decide we're going to move ahead. And so I'm just one member of a 9-member body who all of us, I think, believe very strongly that the future really is going to be a product of how we all determine how to move ahead. And these are not easy conversations to have. Is there money dropping out of the sky? Absolutely not. We have to now be in a mode where we are trying to figure out what are the most important things we need to do. And we are prioritizing those items. And so this is going to be an ongoing conversation, but I can tell you this country is so behind the rest of the world in terms of how we move people. We get visitors from Asia here all the time who just cannot even believe that we don't have the kinds of systems in our country that other parts of the world have. So we're coming from we're behind, and we're trying to do everything that we can to move forward and have these kinds of conversations today, which I think are extraordinarily important to have, and sharing information and really having the conversations at the community level, neighborhood by neighborhood. And I think those are all very important conversations to have. If anybody else wants to weigh in, feel free. Francine.
I will share that we have to attract new businesses, new jobs to the county. And in order to attract those new businesses that will bring in new jobs, which will indeed raise our revenue, and will be able to help support the transportation infrastructure, not only the existing transportation infrastructure, but the new transportation infrastructure. We have to continue, as Council President, sorry, I didn't say that before.
That's okay.
Our Council President has stated that we need to keep moving forward and have that vision. If we do not have that vision moving forward, then we will indeed lag even farther behind and have even a graver concern about revenue within the county.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
Yes, my name is Jorge Sanchez. I live and work in Montgomery County. I have also worked in Washington, D.C. I'm very excited about the changes that are coming up, but I'm also very concerned. As a small business owner, I hear my colleagues express their concern about what's going to happen in the Langley Park area. Not only for business owners, but also for residents. I have seen firsthand what has happened in Washington, specifically in the Adams Morgan area. For business, a lot of people have left simply because the rents are just unbelievable. And something similar is taking place already in the Langley Park area. Thank you.
So I just want to restate, are you asking a question, or you're just...
Expressing my concerns.
You're expressing your concerns, okay.
As a business owner, where do I go from here?
So you have a business at the Crossroads?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody want to make a comment on that? I mean, these are always going to be concerns. I also represent Wheaton, and Wheaton has a metro stop, but has been languishing for a very long time, waiting for an opportunity to have the kind of transit-oriented development that we think is going to come to Langley Park. You're going to probably get there before they do, and they've been waiting a long time. And so, there's a WMATA site right there in Wheaton, and they're waiting for a large business entity, and I know that BF Saul has just come into Wheaton to try to jumpstart Wheaton. Those local small businesses are ecstatic about the opportunity to get something moving. So it's like 6 of one and one half of the other. It's like we're going to have to work very closely with the business owners and Tacoma Langley to make sure that we do all that we can to not price you out of your business. I mean, that's the opposite of what we want to have happen there. So, as I'm talking to business owners in Wheaton, they just wish they could go first. And so, this is going to be a very complicated endeavor, but we're all, we got our rolled up our sleeves and we're ready to do the work necessary. We want you to not just be there, but we want you to be there and thrive and grow with this community. So I appreciate your comments and your concerns. Okay, next question.
Is it on? It's on. Hi. I'm Pamela Svar. I live and work in the Tacoma-Langley area, so this question is kind of just following right along on that. Also a proud resident of Tacoma Park. There are other cities in the United States that have also looked at how to promote transit-oriented development that pays greater attention to equity issues in terms of expanding the opportunity beyond the normal people who benefit from TOD. And so I'm wondering what other cities are you using as models for TOD, which is much more equitable and promotes a more diverse set of benefits for a broader range of people, and what policy tools are they using that you think are appropriate to keep the Tacoma-Langley Park area particularly more economically and culturally diverse?
I might start with the work that we've done in the Denver region. In Denver, nonprofit affordable housing developers as well as affordable housing operators are highly engaged and involved in planning for TOD throughout the region. So some of the plans that we looked at for that entire system, there were not only affordable housing, mixed income developments, but there was also a community Latino grocer that was planned for one of the communities. There are also some examples on the West Coast of affordable housing developments as well as that have included small businesses that have been led by the nonprofit sector. So I think that in this situation, it's going to be a challenge to include those players in the real estate development picture. It's also going to depend on existing property owners, if they stay in ownership, if they want to continue long-term relationships that they've had with some of the businesses that are in Tacoma Park, and if they get additional density that will allow them to keep rents somewhat affordable for business owners. I think those are all possibilities.
I would like to actually direct that question, and I never know your name, the planner from Park and Planning, because I think that Melissa, hand the mic to Melissa. Melissa's done the work from the planning perspective on the Tacoma-Langley bi-county master plan for Montgomery County's side. If you want to speak to that, because I know you've worked on that.
Okay. To be honest, can you repeat the question? I missed the first part of it.
Yeah.
What other communities in the U.S. are models for doing TOD rights so that it's more equitable, not only in terms of affordable housing, but promoting growth of small businesses?
Okay.
And what are the specific policy tools Montgomery County can use, other than relying on the nonprofit sector to do the champions, to make sure that the kind of development we want occurs?
I can tell you that one of the larger projects that we actually referenced as a model was the Fruitvale development, and that's in Oakland, California. And it's a community that's very similar to what you have in the Tacoma-Langley area. It's very diverse. It's predominantly Hispanic. It's a TOD development that was actually led by the community in partnership with BART, which is their regional transit system. Mm-hmm. And so we actually looked at a lot of the information that was available, and that was one of the major developments that we looked at. I can tell you honestly that there is a lot of dependency on nonprofit organizations when you're dealing with kind of engaging the community, and that's just because in most instances they have a little more experience with it. As far as Montgomery County is concerned, we did actually make recommendations to strengthen the community development corporations that are actually operating in the area right now, and that's just because we're dealing with a planned area that actually is by county. And so because you actually have a Prince George's County and a Montgomery County that are at the table, the residents in the community don't identify with the county. They identify with the community. And so it was very important for us to actually have people that had a little more experience with dealing kind of across the county line. So we did make recommendations there. But as far as the protections, and I think that's kind of what you're concerned about, is the protections for affordability, we actually have a recommendation in our plan that says that there should be no net loss of affordable housing. And that was something that DHCA they were very upfront about, that they wanted to make sure that there was a protection there for housing. And we've also looked at ways to protect the affordability for businesses, and I know that there were concerns that we heard from some of the business owners that they would be priced out of the market. So we actually are looking at ways to protect the affordability for the existing community as a whole, and a lot of that will come down to the use of the new zone. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but we do have a new zone that's being introduced by Montgomery County called the CR zones, and they're actually portions of the zone that actually provide additional density for development in exchange for protecting affordable portions of the community. And so that's something that we'll rely heavily on as a part of the TLC sector plan moves forward. But overall, it really comes down to the community being engaged. You have to be at the table when a lot of these decisions are being made, because we are kind of on the outside looking in. You know, we do what we can. We've had community meetings. We try to ask the right questions. But at the end of the day, there are certain nuances that we as planners won't get because we're not there on a regular basis. We're not there on a daily basis. So what we've tried to do is to ask the right questions, to involve the right people, and to look at examples nationally that we could actually try and replicate bits and pieces of in this process.
Can I weigh in?
Sure, go ahead, Dr. Neal.
I can't speak to this in great depth myself. I have a colleague who just recently finished a series of papers for HUD on this particular question, and I'd be glad to send you a copy of that paper if you send me your email address. The other work that we're doing is for HUD, actually, is a study of Montgomery County's MPDU program. Most of the evidence suggests it's working extremely well. And I think extending that and perhaps strengthening that in the TOD areas would be a very interesting and reasonable thing to do. I also think the idea of having something like it for small businesses would be an interesting idea. So that if you could have subsidized or controlled rents for small businesses as a part of the approval process for development, I think parallel to the MPDU program, but for small businesses would be a very interesting idea to explore.
I like that. We'll have to talk. I'll send you an email.
Great.
Time check, Mayor Williams. Okay. Next question.
Hi, I'm Brian Aluni. I'm a design architect with Torty Gallison Partners. We've done a lot of TOD in the region, Columbia Heights, and we're working in Wheaton currently. We typically come in at the end of the process and try to make great places reflective of the community. When we're working on it, I can't guarantee for everyone else, but we do try to make every TOD different and reflective of what the neighborhoods are doing. My question and concern is about the flyovers. I'm more speaking to the public officials here in the room. Oftentimes when we come in and try to design a great TOD, it's really difficult to do it well when you have this big concrete structure overhead. And so anything that folks can do to try to minimize those would be something we would hope to look for. It's a triumph of the vehicle over the public realm when you end up having to put one of those things in. And you can look at this. You can look at TriMet in Portland, for example, for where the least successful TOD is happening. It's typically the ones that do have the flyovers where they're not getting the kind of interest either from the development committee or from the private sector to move in towards those. So, and here in Tysons, we'll have to see what's going to happen when they're finished with the monstrosities they're building over there. But my question really is, what are we doing to sort of try to assure that that's the last step, the last tact we take if there's no other options? What options are we looking at before we go to the step of looking at flyovers for stations?
First, I would caution that the aerial flyover is nowhere near designed yet. It's something we'll be working with the community. An aerial for a light rail will look much different than what you're used to seeing in a metro system. The Fruitvale TOD that Melissa just talked about in Oakdale is an aerial structure, and it's extremely successful in that area. So it's a matter of how you design it and incorporate it with the development happens there. We're aware of that, and one of the major reasons that'll be a major focus of the community when we start the neighborhood groups there. We've already had at least one meeting with the community. It was a Saturday where we had 103 people out. We didn't think we'd get that kind of turnout, but there's great interest in the community working with us and how do we design it. So it's not, one, a monstrosity, two, it doesn't cause too many conflicts in the existing community, but three, how can it work together with some of the plans, and we're working with the developer that owns the land where the station's going to be. How can it work with the development plan?
Okay, next question.
Is that me? Hi. Pat Stingley, 8807 2nd Avenue. I guess I'm going to have to tell you, I'm against the purple line.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right up front. The green that you see is the green that came out of my wallet. I think that, to Francine Waters' earlier point, it makes me want to move, because the elementary school that my kids go to, the class size just doubled. Okay? You're not able to, didn't you guys just take furlough days? Where are you getting this money from? I think I know. Property taxes, and I'm frankly had enough of it. We have high taxes here already. $1.5 billion, where does that come from? Look, I'd like to know how many other people here have ever ridden a bus to Montgomery Mall. Okay, I rode the bus to Montgomery Mall during work hours, because I happened to have a job that took me there. There were like 5 people. So I don't understand how moving to putting a light rail pays for itself. So I've asked the question before, and people said, well, people won't ride the bus. They'll ride the light rail. Fine. But then take the bus option off. When people say, well, they can't afford $1.5 billion, then they're going to put a bus in. People don't ride a bus. This makes no sense to me. All I see is my county being really liberal with spending my money. And frankly, I'm spending plenty of it as it is, and I'd like to have the money put back in schools and various other things instead of a light rail system for people who don't live in our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Next question.
My name is Larry Shulman, and the first gentleman asked a question in terms of the ability of the people in Langley Park to continue to live in Langley Park. And I heard affordable housing mentioned a little bit, but I didn't hear a direct answer. The people that live in Langley Park, and if you look on page 25, educational attainment in the Langley Park area, I equate educational attainment to the amount of money that people earn and their capability of living in the community. And there's no question, and I'm in favor of the purple line, but I don't believe the state or the counties have necessarily looked at the ability of the people who live in Langley Park and in that area, and those with the low educational attainment, to continue to live there. And I think that there needs to be, and I know from my experience in talking with some of those representatives from some of those people, that there is a fear which has not been met, and I agree with the 28 little neighborhood approaches, but this has been going on for 5 years on the part of the state, and they haven't. The second point I'd like to raise is Langley Park Station will not be successful unless the state, Department of Transportation, the MTA, both counties, and Tacoma Park work together there was an effort begun, which the state was not part of, in terms of working together in the spirit that Ms. Waters talked about at White Flint. That has not existed. The state has stayed out of it. The two counties separated. One of the most important things is that the governments work together, because one of the 5 points was support. And it needs to be a coordinated level of support from all of the governments in the spirit of what Ms. Waters talked about, with a level of transparency that has not existed.
Thank you, Larry. I know you well, and I know you've been involved from the very beginning in these conversations between our counterparts in Prince George's County, the state of Maryland, Montgomery County, our planning agency. What we have missing, as you listen to what Francine had to say, is that there is no coordinated effort. And the difference between what happened in White Flint and what's not actually happening at the Crossroads is there is no business entity, really, like the developers that got together and decided that they would tax themselves. There is no, the whole bi-county master plan really didn't go the way I had anticipated when I got elected 5 years ago, and that is that the two counties would actually sit down at the same dais together and have these conversations. Prince George's County decided to go first, and that created a lot of problems on our end of the border. So we have a new county executive now in Prince George's County, Richard Baker, who I think is very open to these kinds of conversations. I don't think it's too late to try to put something like that together with the governor or whoever his designee is. So we are very hopeful that we're going to be able to do something like this. Now, we have a model that we can point to, and we might even actually ask Francine or some folks from the White Flint Partnership to help us try to do a version of that in the Crossroads. And so I know you're frustrated, as am I, and it's been 5 years. It's been a long, long time with a lot of conversations going back and forth, but nothing has ever come together like the partnership. So I'm hopeful. That's how I continue to do this job. I continue to try to be hopeful that we can succeed at some of these things.
I would like to at least bring up, there has been a very strong partnership on the transit piece of it. Tom Autry's here from Montgomery County. Melissa's here. We have constant meetings with both counties with us to continue working on the transit as well as the other issues that come forward. So the mechanism for the coordination between the state and local government has been working for some time, or we wouldn't have gotten to the locally preferred alternative. I'm sure of that. We do understand the issues with the land use. The state, however, will support and help where we can, but we have no authority in how those land use plans move forward, which is why in my presentation I emphasized the land use planning, the sector plans that are going on, because that's where the decisions get made. We are meeting and going to be briefing Executive Baker in a couple weeks. We're having another meeting with Councilman Campos in another week. We've been continuing meeting with your office. We bring these issues up. We talk about them. We do need that developer and I guess a little more focus on the land use and how it can work closer to deal with these issues. We as MTA have limited ability other than to try and facilitate those discussions. We can't force land use decisions. We are very appreciative of the work that Montgomery County has done in this area, and we'll continue to bring these issues up as we meet with the elected officials in Prince George's County, too.
Just so you know, Larry, I did have a conversation with Mr. Baker, and we're going to have to try to regroup and try to put something together where all the interested parties actually are in the same room at the same time. I'm out of time. Is that correct? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm Fred Schultz. I sit on the city council. I've been trying to get a microphone, but I think probably I didn't get one because everybody knows I talk too much as it is, so, and I have the forum every Monday night. I live within walking distance of the Tacoma-Langley proposed metro stop, and I'm greatly in favor of it. I served on, like Bern Kelly, who was the first questioner, on the Master Plan Advisory Group for 2 years, which is extremely helpful to me to understand what's going on here. And I want to address the question that was raised over here about the cost. The thing about this kind of planning is that the easy part is to figure out how much the project's going to cost, because you can sit down and calculate that in terms of an engineering and design and literally what it's going to cost. The hard part, and this is the part that's so hard for residents and taxpayers to understand, is that the hard part is understanding what the economic growth is going to be, what the rise in the tax base is going to be, and to prove the number of jobs that are going to be created, and to be able to prove the rise in the income that residents are going to have to spend in the retail establishments. And so when a businessman hears about the fact, a small businessman hears about the growth and how taxes are going to go up and the affordability is going to get a lot worse for housing, what you don't hear about, of course, is the rising tide that hopefully will lift maybe not all the boats, but certainly the vast majority of the boats. And no doubt that in these kinds of huge transitions, some small businesses fall by the wayside. And I know that's the case. I worked in Arlington County when the sector plans are being developed for all those 5 metro stops, and many, many, many small businesses just got wiped out and disappeared because of the size of the redevelopment that occurred. I don't think that's going to happen in Tacoma-Langley. I do want to address the question about the bi-county issue here, and that is that the Crossroads Development Authority, years ago, it was intended to be a bi-county body, and through politics, that whole thing fell apart. It was being advanced by the state of Maryland, by the governor's office, and it was actually meeting. That we would very much like to reinstitute that, and there's a number of property owners, businesses on both sides that would be very interested in being able to reestablish that, because I think that's essential if we're going to be talking about keeping rents affordable for housing and for retail and that sort of thing. And I have a ton of questions I'd like to ask, but we've run out of time, and I appreciate this has been very, very helpful to you.
Thank you very much, Fred. We should definitely double back. And let me just say to Mayor Williams, you put together a fantastic panel of experts, and I'd like to just thank them all, Marcia Kaiser, Francine Waters, Kate Bollinger, and Dr. Knapp for being here and for being so wonderful and sharing all your expertise with us.
Thank you. And I just very briefly like to also thank, well, I've got it on. It's up. Thank Council President Valerie Irvin for moderating this. We appreciate your being here to help. And I also just wanted to recognize that this was put together by our Housing and Community Development Department. Sarah Daines is the director of that department, and Alana Blanchard was the lead on putting this together, and also assisted by Carmen Lamb. And Phil Orchard, who's the new intern. So, and thank you all for coming, and if you want to get any more information and follow up on any of this, if you look on the back of the brochure, thenewav.com is the city's website for all of this, and if you want to follow updates on the sector plan and also on development of design standards for Tacoma-Langley, all of the information is on that website. You can follow it. Thank you all again. Thank you all again.
Okay, I woke up about halfway through it.